years ago today that I went to see the Dead Sea Scrolls at the Leonardo in Salt Lake City. Seems like that was a long time ago. How cool is that? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like history came to you, man. History comes to you. It's just awesome. Very, very, very cool. Let's see here. What can I tell you? What can I tell you about today? Other than I just heard some disturbing news regarding Campbell soup. Apparently, you know how you get that classic tomato soup and, it's like, oh, just because you get outside and it's all snowy and you get your snow pants on and you're making snowmen and you come inside and your mom has this tomato soup with grilled cheese sandwiches. It's like comfort food, USA, right? Well, they decided, it's just so much trouble to be able to dunk your grilled cheese into your soup.
So much work.
Oh, man. So let's put the grilled cheese in your soup. That's what they've decided. So Campbell Soup has this limited edition grilled cheese and tomato soup, and it's got this really cool retro look to it, right? It's like instead of the white and red color, it's this yellow, like the retro yellow color with the red, and hearkening to the days of I don't know when soup was old. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this. I kind of feel like that's disgusting. Like, if I wanted my grilled cheese to be in the soup, I would have probably blended it in. And I don't know how that works. Is it chunky? Is it, I mean, when you eat it, do you have like little strings of cheese like kind of coming out? I mean,
I think it's artificial flavoring.
Oh.
They just add some
Gross.
extra flavor.
That's disgusting. I think the whole part of the fun of the soup and the grilled cheese is the fact that they're two separate things. They put them together and you get the textures and you get the smells. But that just sounds disgusting to me. Maybe I'm judgy. Maybe I'm just really judgy today. Critical. Maybe I'm judgy. Maybe I'm judgy because we're studying judges. I have no idea. Oh, man. Well, let me see. What else can I tell you? I don't know. I don't know what else I can tell you. What I can say, though, friend, is, by the way, Key Radio is here for you. And we really want to connect you with local churches. That's one of our, that's one, I don't want to say one of our hearts because that means we have a lot of hearts, but maybe we do. But that's on our heart. We really want you to connect with people who love the Lord and who'll be able to walk alongside you and to learn alongside you and to do life together. Because you know what? Radio is great. We can do a lot of teaching and really, I think, reinforce the teaching that you get in your local church. But, people face-to-face who are actually investing in you and your life and the life of your family, or maybe you're by yourself in the land of Utah and you're like, what a great way to meet godly friends who be able to, be your family. So anyway, we want to connect you with that, but also we want to pray for you. And maybe you're in a time in your life where you're like, I'm really struggling with this. Well, let us know. We pray for you every weekday at 10-ish, 10:30 usually, because I always have to run around and do things, but always during that time. And so if you need prayer, we will pray for you. And you could just, submit your prayer request to us, maybe on our app. It's free. You can download that, or maybe on our website. And right on the homepage there, you're going to see prayer requests, and you can submit them there, or you could just email us, prayer@keyradio.org, whatever you want to do, but we would love to pray for you. So there's that as well. Grant, is there anything else that we had a kind of a fun time yesterday, did we not, after the morning show?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. We recorded an episode of
Truth Points.
Truth Points. That's what the show's called.
Where was I? What was it called?
Well, we recorded it here in the Key Radio studios. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's just like, I just stuck around. We just kept going.
We just keep talking. It's all we do all day, right? But yes, our very good friend, Corey Pensabene, and you probably have heard him because we have like little shorts, 2-minute shorts of Corey just giving us information about worldview and information about apologetics and the reasonableness of Christianity, all of that stuff. And they're just really nice weekly vignettes, if you will. And he's a really good friend of ours, and he has a ministry called Truth Points, and you can look at that at truthpoints.org. But yeah, so he just came in and he's like, I want to interview the two bozos who do the morning show in the morning at Key Radio. He didn't say that. I'm being silly. But it was a lot of fun. It was, in all seriousness, it was a real privilege to be able to just kind of have these great discussions and be on the other side of it. That was kind of the weird thing. Is usually we do interviews. We're the people who get to ask the questions, right? This time we had to answer some, and it's kind of fun. It was a lot of fun. And Corey's a good friend, and so you could be looking for that. And I would say too, go to Corey's YouTube channel and subscribe. Subscribe to Truth Points Apologetics. You'll be glad that you did. He's a super, super nice guy, loves people, loves the Lord, and really desires to not just encourage you, but to really equip you to be able to give a reasonable answer when people ask you questions about the hope that's found inside you. So very good. And so more about that later. Anything else, Grant, that you could think of that we need to discuss before we go plowing into Judges?
No, I think we're good to jump into it.
Okay. I'm going to let you introduce it. How's that? I'm always talking.
Yeah, sure, we can do that.
Okay.
We've been going through the book of Judges, and the book of Judges is it's a historical book in the Old Testament that records this time in Israel's history. It's after they exit Egypt. They wander in the wilderness for 40 years, and then they finally are able to enter the Promised Land under the leadership of Joshua. The book of Joshua ends at the end of Joshua's life, and the book of Judges begins at the end of Joshua's life. So there's this time period where Israel is kind of, it's a new nation, and they're just trying to find themselves in this new home. And in those days, they didn't have a king. They were just very self-governed. The idea was that they were to be a theocracy, that they were to live their lives by these traditions and by the law of Moses. And as long as everyone lived in accordance to this law that outlined clearly how their nation was to be run, how their families were supposed to be lived out, just everything was all very clearly laid out in the law. And as long as they lived their lives by this law, everything would be fine. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, after the initial generation died off, there was this falling away from the Lord and from this. It describes it as this knowledge of the Lord. The next generation didn't know the Lord, and so the law and the traditions, they didn't really have quite as much of a place in their lives. Living their lives in accordance to the instruction of the Lord didn't quite have the same appeal to it as it did to those who knew the Lord and knew His faithfulness. This thing happened where the Lord told them to go into the land and to conquer and to wipe out the nations that were currently occupying the land. The primary reason for this was they were very, very wicked nations. They were involved in some very horrific things. Their pagan worship was so horrific. It involved child sacrifice. It involved
prostitution.
All sorts of sin and debauchery, and so the Lord was passing judgment on these nations, and the children of Israel failed to enact the Lord's judgment on them, and they, instead of wiping them all out, they forced them into submission, into paying them tribute to the slave labor. And as a result of this, over time, these nations rose back up, and they turned the tables on the Israelites, and the Israelites were now being oppressed by these people groups. And so in these times of great turmoil where they were being oppressed by these other nations, the Lord had mercy on the Israelites and raised up for them these political and military leaders known as judges. And that's where the book gets its name. So today we're going to be looking at this judge called Deborah.
I'm so glad that you brought up a bit of the Deuteronomy to get us going into it too, because if you look at Deuteronomy 30, just to your point here, this is kind of like the last hurrah before they're change hands with leaders going into Joshua, right? And it's just very interesting because God says this commandment or his law, right, that I command you today is not too hard for you, neither is it far off. And then he goes on to say, but the word is very near to you. It is in your mouth and in your heart so that you can do it. So God is enabling these people to follow the Lord. But he says, see, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I command you today by loving the Lord your God, by walking in his ways, and by keeping his commandments and his statutes and his rules, then you shall live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to take possession of it. Those are all good things. If you follow my laws, all these good things are going to happen. I think we forget that, right? Like God says, hey, do this, don't do this. And you're like, oh, you can't tell me what to do. But it's for your good, right? This is the reason. These are parameters because God knows how you flourish as a human being because he actually created you. Shocker of all shockers. But he says in verse 17, if your heart turns away and you will not hear but are drawn away to worship other gods and serve them. Oh, does this sound familiar? I declare to you today that you shall surely perish. You shall not live long in the land that you are going over the Jordan to enter and possess. And I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore choose life, that you and your offspring may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying his voice, and holding fast to him. So this is it. If you choose God, you choose life and good. If you choose evil, if you decide to reject God, then you're going to have death and evil. So this is what's going on here, and apparently they're choosing the latter.
Yeah, and it's something that we really need to look at is just how striking it is that over the course of a few generations that they not only went from serving the Lord, but they were serving these false gods, the gods of the people around them. And these were the children of Israel, God's chosen people. They were given truth, they were given light, and they had a relationship with God, where God said, this is who I am who I am, and you will be my people, and I will be your God, and this is how we will have this relationship. And he gave them the law, and he gave them this nation, and he gave them, this structure, and instead of living in that, they sought other gods. They sought the gods that offered them the worship that was through child sacrifice, through prostitution. This is what they exchanged the goodness and holiness of God for. It was for the sinful worship of these false gods, and it got them nowhere. Worshiping the gods of the nations around them didn't get them in good with those nations. Those nations instead rose up, and they were the ones that they sought camaraderie with were the same nations that sought to conquer them. Mm-hmm. So there's this really interesting dichotomy there where often we look at sin and we look at just aligning ourselves with those around us. We want to fit in. We want to live the same lifestyles regardless of how sinful they are as the people around us. And what we find is these lifestyles, it ends up consuming us regardless. Mm-hmm. It's the very thing that is our own downfall, and that's the real nature of sin. Is it promises all of these things. It promises the safety, the security. It promises the the passion. It promises the good feelings, the pleasures of this world, and then but it only leads to death and destruction. So the very thing that we welcome in ends up destroying us from the inside out.
Wow. And there's so much application to that. It's like you can't even talk about sugar, right? It promises all these great things, but in the end, it destroys you. I mean, honestly, I mean, that's just, we know this intuitively, and yet we still dabble in dangerous things. Just to give you an idea of what they're attracted to here, I'm looking at God questions. I just put in Baal. Who's Baal, right? And this was the name of a supreme god worshipped by the ancient Canaan and Phoenicia. Okay. Now, what's interesting about Baal is that Baal was the son of this. Again, this is really mythology here. Is a son of this other god named El, and El was not as powerful as Baal. And Baal, by the way, was the brother again of Ashtoreth. So you're seeing that there's and you hear like they have this mythology of their battles and whatever. It sounds just like Roman mythology. I mean, so there's nothing new under the sun. And I think we have to understand that with Satan, right? He's always interjecting things, and man is conjuring up things based on what other people are believing, and then they form and fashion their own gods. And the point on all I'm trying to make here is God shares his glory with no one. Absolutely no one. God says, I alone am God. Have no other gods but me, right? Do not make any graven images. He is so serious about this. And the reason is this. These people, the Israelites, the children of Israel, right? They were fleeing from exactly that. Why do you think there were all those plagues? All those plagues were showing the supremacy of God. Look at all these so-called gods in Egypt that there were so many of them. And all the people were worshiping these gods, and God showed himself, his power over all. It was not missed by the Egyptians, and it should not be missed by us. So why do you think God would even entertain the thought of sharing his glory with these Baals? Now, let's go, if I can. I know I'm kind of getting sidetracked, but I think this is a great application for us today. Look what we're doing. We are actually fashioning. There's this things called progressive Christianity. We'll call it that, where they're like, God isn't who he says he is. And they start really trying to, they call it deconstruction. Deconstructing something isn't bad in and of itself as long as you're building on truth when you're finished with it, right? When you're, and what's happening is a lot of people in society are saying, well, it's God plus this, or Jesus is okay, but really Jesus is a lesser God. And we hear this, like, and actually how Jesus shares, he's a brother of Satan. And so we become, and we bring God down to our level. That's a dangerous place to be, because God will not share his glory with anyone. We have God from all eternity who took on flesh to deal with our sin. Why would we ever think that wasn't enough? And so I just feel like really strongly, like we could sit here and criticize these silly little Israelites. Like, oh, I can't believe that they're worshiping a so-called God with a cow head, right? Oh, they're so foolish. Are we any different? No, we're not any different. The sin is still sin because we're still elevating other things over God. That is devastating. Devastating not just in our relationship with God, but also devastating with our relationship with others. So just there's a cause of warning here. And do I sound like I'm on a soapbox? Yeah, I guess I am. But I see myself doing it. It doesn't have to be that I'm even... I'm not even saying that God isn't God, right? But then what do I do? What are more important things in my life that I hold dear? What am I holding on to that I'm not allowing God to use? Maybe my family is my God. Maybe my money is my God. Maybe my status is my God. Are we willing to lay down our lives to serve the God who loved us and who gave his life for us? Just words of thought, just thoughts. So here we are. Yesterday we talked about, gross, Ehud and Eglon, and how Ehud being a judge. He went to Eglon, who was oppressing the Israelites, and he killed him in a really gruesome, disgusting, yucky thing. What was amazing, my takeaway on that yesterday was, here is this proud king. He's got these vast armies under his disposal, and here's this sad little Israelite bringing tribute to him, and he just stabs him in the guts with a small little sword. Like, not even a sword; it's a dagger. It's a knife. It's 18 inches maybe tops.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just really interesting there. And today we're going to see something now this is Ehud and now Deborah, okay? And Deborah comes after, but you have to also remember, yesterday we also talked about Shamgar. It's just a little bit of a blip, but Shamgar was a judge during the same time that Deborah was. So sometimes they're judges, they didn't go just Ehud, then Shamgar, then Deborah. There's a lot of overlap on a lot of these. So let's get into it, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay. You want to take it?
Sure, I can.
Okay.
This is Judges chapter 4, starting in verse 1. Then the sons of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord after Ehud died. And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor, and the commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim. The sons of Israel cried to the Lord, for he had 900 iron chariots, and he oppressed the sons of Israel severely for 20 years. Now Deborah was a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at the time. She used to sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And the sons of Israel came up to her for judgment. Now she sent and summoned Barak, the son of Abinoam, from Kadesh Naphtali, and said to him, Behold, the Lord, the God of Israel, has commanded, Go and march to Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men from the sons of Naphtali and from the sons of Zebulun. I will draw out to you Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and with his many troops, to the river Kishon, and I will give him into your hand. Then Barak said to her, If you go with me, then I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. She said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the honor shall not be yours on the journey that you are about to take, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hands of a woman. Then Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh.
Okay. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. And sometimes you read this and you think, okay, I see where this is going. I think that when you read the Bible, you need to have a map in front of you because there's a lot of things that they're saying here. And you're like, I have no idea where these places are. So I think it's really important. So let's just kind of set the stage because there's just a lot that you just threw at us here. And again, we just went online, right? Grant found this amazing map that it's a judge's map. I don't know if you're radio, I'm sorry, you can't see this, but I just printed out a map here, and it basically shows where the judges were in their areas, and it also shows with some of the major cities, and it shows it's just a good map to have, right? And so it's good to see this. Now, Deborah, she was living near the Dead Sea, kind of by Bethlehem, okay? And so she's got this palm tree that they just said it's her palm tree. Like, she just claimed it, right? I think that's really funny. I'm going to go out and claim a palm tree down in St. George. But she would sit there and she would be judging. People really respected this woman. God had given her great discernment. And so she for whatever reason. Now, people like to speculate. I want to just kind of address that a little bit. Some people say, well, the spiritual atmosphere of Israel was so weak and men weren't stepping up and being leaders that God has ordained them to be. So God used a woman instead. Okay, fine. If you want to say that, that's fine. I don't like to read too much into these things. I think if God's going to choose a woman, he's going to choose a woman, and that's fine. Notice though that she's not leading an army. She's just judging. I think that's really important that we understand that there's still a creative order in all this.
Yeah.
A different conversation for a different time. Right?
and also, I think it's good to note that at the same time that Deborah was a judge, Shamgar was also a judge, and he was out just hunting down Philistines with nothing but a cattle prod as a weapon. So I mean, I think I wouldn't say that that idea, that sentiment is wrong, that that men do have this responsibility, and especially in this culture, to stand up and lead their families, lead their communities, to take action and to defend that which they love. But I don't think that this passage is a strong illustration of that idea. And I think it's wrong to try to pull that idea out of this. We have a tendency to want things to agree with us. And so we'll have our own soapboxes, and then we read our soapbox into whatever passage of Scripture we're reading. And that's a wrong way to handle the Bible. What we need to do is to first read the passage and ask, what is this saying? What is the author trying to communicate here? What does this passage actually say? And then after we have established that, then we can look at things like themes, and we can look at things like the messaging, and after that, then we can look at the application to our own lives. So I think there's a very serious process that we have to go to before we just jump to wanting to see what we want to see in what we're reading in the Bible.
I think that is a very humble way and the proper way of approaching God's word. And especially since we're fiery Western people who think all of these things, but that's not how the Eastern people back in the ancient days thought. And so we have to make sure that we don't foist our own our own societal expectations on the word of God. So that's a very good approach. So what we're seeing here then, Deborah's just kind of hanging out. She's doing the thing that God has ordained her to do, and people highly respect her. But she gets this word of the Lord, really, from and she's like, you know what? I'm going to call out Barak. Now, this is an interesting thing, because you have to understand where they are. She's down near the Dead Sea. Barak lives near Hatzor. So that is actually north of them by the Sea of Galilee. And I had to do I love going on MapQuest, and I went on Google Maps, whatever. But just to kind of figure out what's going on here. So she was there. She sent and summoned Barak the son of Abinoam from Kadesh Naphtali and said to him, okay, so stop. She sent word to him. So this is a 2-day journey by walking. This is like the same distance, if you will, from Orem to Richfield, or about there, give or take a couple of miles, okay? So this is a big deal. So she sends for him. So somebody walks 2 hours or whatever, or 2 days, and then he has to come down. So she sent for him. I think that's a really important thing. Things are going on. She's the judge for down in her area, which is near Ephraim, right? This is north, and this is Naphtali, and I'm missing it. Is it? Well, we'll keep reading. So we have to understand that there's a lot of stuff going on here in a couple of sentences. And then she tells him, after his long journey, has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you to go gather your men at Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 people from Naphtali and Zebulun? There it is. And if you look at a map, and again, look at a map, Naphtali and Zebulun are they're border countries, if you will. Okay? And then it says, and I will draw Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, to meet you by the river Kishon with his chariots and his troops, and I will give them into your hand. So she's telling him this is what the Lord has said. This is not just okay, let's go take our army and defeat this guy. This is scary stuff. Like you just talked about Shamgar. Shamgar had a cattle prod, and he killed 600 Philistines. God uses the weak to shame the strong. We have to remember that Israel, even though they're a large people, they're still not a nation that everybody even Israel doesn't actually recognize themselves as a full nation at this point, right? They're they're just trying to take their territories just as God told them, but they're really weak. And they're not following the Lord. They're not trusting the Lord. And now, even with 10,000 people, they're chariots. There's these chariots, and chariots were a sign of great strength. And Sisera had 900 of these. So you get a bunch of farmers, basically, and they're supposed to overtake this incredible army. This is not a small test, okay? This is a big leap of faith. And I can see why Barak is a little nervous about this. Should we keep reading?
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't you go ahead, I guess starting in 8. Verse 8
yep.
there. Yeah.
Then Barak said to her, "If you go with me, then I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go." She said, "I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the honor shall not be yours on the journey that you are about to take. For the Lord will sell Sisera into the hands of a woman." Then Deborah rose and went with Barak to Kadesh.
Okay. No, this is funny because when I first read this, I'll never forget it because I'm like, you know what, Barak, you're like, I'm going to take Deborah. So I just naturally assumed that it was going to be Deborah who takes down Sisera. That's like, as I'm reading this, because I'm like, I know this. This is what's going to happen. And of course, that's not at all what happened, which we're going to find real carefully. But, Deborah's saying, listen, it's not going to be you. You're not going to be able to get this victory. You're not going to be known as the one victorious over Sisera. It's going to be a woman. But I can't really blame Barak because that's a terrifying thing what God is asking for him to do. And he never says, I'm not going to go, period. He just wants to make sure the spokesperson for the Lord is with him when he goes. And before we get too carried away and being rough on him, I want to just kind of flip back to Hebrews, which we were really studying not that long ago. And in Hebrews, when we're looking at the hall of faith here in chapter 11, Barak is mentioned here as a man who had great faith. So I want to make sure that we understand something very important. Americans love heroes. We love superheroes. And even when the superheroes have chinks in their armor, so to speak, they're so powerful people with superhuman strength and they can swim really fast through water or they're doing lightning bolts or running fast or whatever the superhero does. But the reality is God uses the weak. And even in the weak faith that Barak has, the Lord still honored Barak all those years later back in the New Testament times in the book of Hebrews. And that should give us, I think, great comfort, right? To say, I'm not strong sometimes, Lord. I'm struggling and he still loves you and he's not going to, now something might change and he's going to bolster your faith, but he doesn't, I think he honors even the smallest of faith.
Yeah, I think we can. It's easy for us to look at him wanting to take Deborah along, but at the same time, he still went.
Yeah.
And so that is the action of faith. That is stepping out on knowing that God will do what He said He will do. And even though he was giving Deborah this stipulation of I will obey if you go with me, he still stepped out in faith, and it was this impossible task where it was a bunch of farmers rallying together against this trained, well-equipped army. It said 900 iron chariots. That could do some serious damage, especially on a bunch of very ill-trained and ill-equipped people who just kind of rally together. It's kind of the same idea as just like regular people with their hunting rifles against a battalion of tanks coming at you. So it's the same idea. It's very Red Dawn kind of warfare going on here. So it's Yeah, I also don't want to downplay the faith that we can see here in Barak and in Deborah, to have that faith in the Lord, that the battle belongs to the Lord, and it isn't in the strength of chariots and horses, but their trust was in the Lord. And that is evidenced by them setting out, them actually doing what the Lord has told them to do. So yeah, I often we can get this idea of faith that it's like a feeling where we have like this strong confidence, and so we have no wavering whatsoever. We stand firm, and there's nothing that can ever come against us. And that isn't really addressed here. That aspect, when we look at Hebrews, it's seen in the action that the faith leads to, not the feeling or personal like internal security about something, but that actual step of faith shows that evidence that the faith exists, no matter how we feel about it or how shaky it is, or if we need to take Deborah along to feel better about it,
Deborah's like this teddy bear. I just need somebody to comfort me. I think it's great. So again, let's not. I mean, if I were in his shoes, I'd be scared. I'd be scared out of my mind. So I think this is fantastic. We all have to be really honest when we're reading this stuff, right? So he does what she says. She comes along again. They have to go 2 days journey to go back to where Barak was. So we have to remember there's a lot of stuff going on here. Barak then calls out to Zebulun and calls out to Naphtali and calls them over to Kadesh. Again, that takes time to do all that because they didn't have cell phones and, all that. So we have to remember there's messengers involved. 10,000 men went up at his heels, and Deborah went with them. Now, Heber the Kenite had separated from the Kenites. And and it goes on to say the descendants of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tent as far away as the oak in Zananim, which is near Kadesh. Now, the Kenites, generally speaking, were allies, I guess you could say, with the king, right? That they're going out to fight. And so there's that. But this particular family separated from themselves from the rest of the Kenites. Okay, tuck that back in the back of your mind. Now, Sisera, who was this army general, right, was told that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. Sisera called out all his chariots, right, 900 chariots of iron, and all the men who were with him, and they went to Kashan. And again, you have to look at your map, right, and find out where those rivers are. It's kind of nice to see like what's going on and what these battles entail. And you can imagine, if you can, like you said, all these foot soldiers with their, I don't know, plows, a share, whatever. They're looking, and there's all these well-equipped men with 900 chariots. Absolutely terrifying. But here's something interesting. The Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army before Barak by the edge of the sword. And Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot. Flip over to 5 just for a little bit here, because Deborah, at the end of this thing, Deborah and Barak actually write a song together. I think it's great. They collaborated, right? And it's interesting. It says, Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled. The heavens dropped, yes, the clouds dropped with water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, even Sinai before the Lord, the God of Israel. But get this, yes, the clouds dropped with water. Many commentators are saying, you know what the Lord did? Flash flood. Now think about that. Can a chariot of iron get through mud? This is fantastic.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. Like, think about that. A chariot's only as good as the ground that it's on. And it can't get through mud if it's so heavy. And it's not exactly like they had skis or treads like we have today on our cars. They don't have all-weather wheels, right? So I just found that very fascinating in this. Do you have any comments? Or am I just...
No, the advantage of the chariot was its speed and maneuverability. It was armored. It was you were able to fight more efficiently than you would be from horseback. So it's like the best of both worlds. It's the speed of the horse, but you're also able to stand and fight, and it's difficult to take down a chariot. They would for long range they would have slings, probably like David did against Goliath, and most of these people, like we said, the Israelites were poor. They didn't have the military training. They didn't have the weapons, so they probably wouldn't have had the archery. They wouldn't have had chariots to match theirs. They wouldn't have had horses. They wouldn't have had swords, probably. So the idea of having an army of 900 iron chariots was very intimidating. But here we see that, the chariots would have required, the wide open plains to really have their advantage. And in the event of a flash flood, especially in this area, which is a rather dry climate, if all of a sudden there's a lot of water, there is every advantage that a chariot would have had in that situation is reversed, where now you can't move at all, and you find yourself kind of stuck in this metal. What was your tank is now your metal cage. You gotta get out and fight on foot, and so now it's an even playing field. And we really see that, especially in this song that they sang, in Judges 5:20, they say the stars fought from heaven, and their courses they fought against Sisera. The torrent of Kishon swept them away. The ancient torrent, the torrent Kishon. O my soul, march on with strength. So it's just this. It's very clear to the people that were there that it was the Lord that defeated this massive army.
So fascinating. So you can see now why Sisera, this major military general, he jumps out of his chariot, right? Because it's probably stuck. We're trying to envision this. And it says the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots. Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot. Now, my brain is like some general, right? Leaving all his guys and he's just like running for his life. I think he was afraid because he also recognized that this was not, that God, the God of Israel, was against him. That's just what I'm seeing. And it says, and Barak pursued the chariots and the army to Harasheth Hagoyim, and all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not a man was left. Again, this is not because of the military prowess of the Israelites. Everything to do with the Lord. But wait, there's more. Sisera, remember this army general, so strong and so arrogant, right? Fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Remember the Kenites? Remember this family that went away from the Kenites? Okay, the wife of Heber the Kenite. For there was peace between Jabin the king of Hatzor, remember, that's Sisera's guy, and the house of Heber the Kenite. So Sisera's thinking, This might be a good thing. I think I have an ally here. And Jael came out to meet Sisera and said to him, turn aside, my lord. Turn aside to me. Do not be afraid. So she's like, come on in. Come into my tent. I'll save you, right? So he turned aside to her tent, into the tent, and she covered him with a rug. Like, I'm going to hide you. Okay? This looks real. This looks legit. And he said to her, please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty. So she opened up a skin of milk and gave him a drink and covered him. The best that I can think is he wanted water. She gave him something better. He was trying to hide. Come to my tent. Here's a rug. We'll hide you there. You wanted water. I'm going to give you milk. Like she's looking very hospitable, very kindly to him, right? That's what I'm getting out of it. Your study is different? Or?
I mean, there's also the idea that milk is a nap time drink. So that is.
Let me warm this up for you.
yeah. Given the context, well, they didn't have refrigeration,
right?
So it would have been, it comes out of the udder. It comes out room temperature.
That's right.
Warm, and so it doesn't get cold, so giving him milk would have been, kind of a, and it mentions explicitly that he was exhausted.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure milk wouldn't help his exhaustion.
Yeah, she didn't say, "Here, have a cup of coffee. You got work to do."
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so she's lulling him into this sense of comfort, like safety, right?
Yeah.
Which is so fascinating to me. So she opened a skin of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him. And you know how when you get covered, you get sleepy too? Like, I can't sleep in nap unless I've got like covers over me. It's just something about being warm, right? So this is good stuff. And he said to her, okay, he trusts her. And he says, stand at the opening of the tent. And if any man comes and asks you, is anyone here? Just say no. Okay, so she's like, all right. But the Jael, the wife of Heber, took a tent peg. Oh, this is so gross. Judges is amazing. And took a hammer in her hand. Then she went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple until it went down into the ground while he was lying fast asleep from weariness. So he died. So he died. He's literally pinned to the ground. This is amazing. Like, he thought she was his ally, and here she's exacting the judgment that Deborah had mentioned earlier to Barak. Barak probably thinking it was Deborah who's going to get the victory to overcome Sisera, and here it's this Kenite woman who's not even an Israelite, and she is the one who gets the victory. I just think that is so crazy. And behold, as Barak was pursuing Sisera, so he's like, I got to find this guy, Jael went out to meet him and said to him, come, and I will show you the man you are seeking. So he went into her tent, and there lay Sisera dead with the tent peg in his temple. Just crazy. And do you think that Sisera ever in a million years would have dreamed that this mighty, mighty man of valor would be able to be defeated by this woman, probably Bedouin woman in a tent, just giving him milk and cookies before going to bed? I mean, just crazy stuff. And I was also thinking about, why did she use the tent peg? And I think I know. Because she lived in a tent and it probably moved around a lot. So she was very, very good at driving pegs into the ground to keep her tent up. So, I mean, she probably had really strong arms, and she's like, okay, this she could do because she's done it 100 times and she really didn't have to think about it.
Yeah. It sounds like she was able to do it very quickly and efficiently. Yeah. If she wasn't very good at it, you kind of wake up after the first whack. Yeah, I don't want to get too deep into that thought. But yes, it sounds like she was very good at it. My favorite part of this song that they sing is they paint this picture of Sisera's mother waiting for Sisera to come home.
Yes.
And so it just feels very, very Deborah, where it's like just like this woman's perspective of waiting for her little boy to come home. And so I just love that they include this in Judges chapter 5, verse 28. It says, out of the window she looked and lamented, the mother of Sisera through the lattice. Why does his chariot delay in coming? Why do the hoofbeats of his chariots tarry? Her princesses would answer her, indeed, she repeats her words to herself. Are they not dividing the spoil? A maiden, 2 maidens for every warrior. To Sisera a spoil of dyed work, a spoil of dyed work embroidered, dyed work of double embroidery on the neck of the spoiler. Thus let all your enemies perish, O Lord, but let those who love him be like the rising of the sun in its might. And the land was undisturbed for 40 years. So this is just like this picture of, what Sisera was doing and how his mother would have viewed this of like, oh, he's just taking all the Israelites' best stuff, and that takes time to pillage and to steal.
And the spoils must be so big and so many.
He must be, it just takes so much time to divide all those spoils. And these oppressed people, the Israelites, they've had their women taken off by these foreign soldiers, and they've had any good thing that they might have had to their own was pillaged, was taken from them. And this was a regular thing. This was a regular occurrence in their oppression, that any time they would try to rise up against these people, they were just met with devastation and destruction. And this seemed like another attempt that was foiled, but it was because it was the Lord that led them, and it was the battle belonged to the Lord, and it was an act of God that destroyed this powerful army. And oftentimes we can look at our situation and we look at things very practically and physically, where we say, well, these are the odds, this is the situation, and we kind of discount God when we do these calculations of like, well, they have 900 chariots, and
Carry the
we
ones.
don't have anything that could match that, and so we're stuck here. And we don't seek the Lord when we find ourselves in these impossible, difficult situations.
One of the other things, too, that people see is like, okay, look how Israel was just outmaneuvered, outdid this, outdid that. And we're elevating Deborah, we're elevating Barak, we're elevating Jael. And here's the thing. I just was reading this woman of noblecharacter.com, and they said, who is Deborah of the Bible? Just real quickly here. With an impressive resume as a judge, military strategist, poet, and prophet, she is also a singer and songwriter. Okay, stop. I get what they're saying, but I think they're elevating Deborah too much. Because here's the thing. Military strategist, she just said, this is what God said. And then she called somebody and said, you got to go do this. He said, you should come with me. She's like, all right, but then a chick's going to take over your glory. But, I mean, military strategist, she didn't do anything. She didn't say, oh, you know what, if we just start a flood over there, then their chariots. She didn't do any of that. And I mean, I appreciate what they're trying to do. And they want to really make sure that they're honoring women of noble character. But sometimes I think the character itself, the faith in a person itself, is enough to be celebrated, because we all know that if she was that military strategist like this person says she is, then God does not get his glory, right? And that's the thing that kind of bothers me about those. It's like, just read what it says and then celebrate the fact that God is the God of deliverance. God is the God of redemption. God is the one who is faithful even when we are unfaithful. God is the one who is, when he says, I'm going to pay for your sins, I'm going to defeat sin and death on your behalf, that we can trust him and just go to him, because God has time and time again proved himself to us when he didn't even need to.
Yeah. The most admirable characteristic of Deborah is her faith and her faithfulness, and how she obeyed the Lord, and how she did as he instructed. This is the most admirable thing. If you walk away from this story and think, wow, what look at all the things that she did. The thing that she did that was the most impressive was her faith in the Lord.
And if we go back to Hebrews, and I think it's 11:6, it says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. You draw near to God and believe that he exists, and then he rewards those who seek him. And friend, today is that day where you go before the Lord, knowing that he is God and you are not. And if you've been living a life that has been rebellious toward him, and we all have, go before him today and say, Lord, thank you for delivering me through Jesus Christ and what Christ has done on the cross, paying for my sins, because the wages of sin, what I deserve, is death and eternal separation from you and misery forever. But Lord, I know what Jesus has done. I believe in him. I trust that what he did is sufficient to pay for my sins and to give me eternal life. I am yours. Then welcome to the family. Thanks for joining us today on the Key Radio Morning Show.